This is the Chris Stigall Show podcast.
Okay, guys, let's just rip. And Chris Stigall.
Chris Stigall. Chris, thanks for being with me tonight.
Chris Stigall.
I'm joined now by Chris Stigall.
Now, he puts the broad in broadband. It's Chris Stigall.
The Chris Stigall podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
Hey, happy Halloween. It is Tuesday, the 31st day of October. This is it for the month, and I thank you so much for downloading the Chris Stigall Show podcast. We've got a good one for you today. Naomi Wolf, who is always a favorite of this audience. I hear from you every time we have her on. A classical liberal. She is, but increasingly a big Trump fan. She's a big RFK Jr. fan, too, so I'm curious to know what she thinks about that since he's become independent. But she has a brand new book out that's coming out next month. You can pre-order it now, called Facing the Beast, Courage, Faith, and Resistance in a New Dark Age. This show kind of has a theme today, fitting that she's on today, and her new book is called Facing the Beast and talks about a new dark age. I also have Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer on today. I talk with them both about this same theme, this lack of awareness or this willful ignorance of, and by the way, Fast Eddie accidentally swerves into something that I think is also sort of a neighboring theme. If you are someone of faith, and I don't care what your faith is, what your faith background is, I don't care if you're Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, it is undeniably true. Judeo-Christian values are smack dab square in the sights of Marxists who hate any kind of organized religion, Islamists who are militant, people like Hamas, and those that would support terrorist groups like Hamas. The Judeo-Christian ethic, mores, values, not just in this country but worldwide, sights are clearly set on you and me. And all of these conversations, whether it's a lack of history, an ignorance of history, or just, quite frankly, spiritual darkness. It's a deeper discussion, I'll admit, but given that it is Halloween, it's an interesting one. Fast Eddie also has some observations. He's a big horror film guy, so he has some observations about this new Exorcist film that came out. He and I were talking before the show, and I thought it was sort of an interesting observation. Now, maybe you are going to think I'm making too much of it, but what he told me he saw in this new film, I thought was noteworthy given the conversation today. So that's a little of what we're going to do on this Halloween. Not to be a total bummer. My daughter, who is, she, bless her heart, she wants so desperately to get out there and still trick or treat. And so we're going to let her do that a little bit with a couple of girlfriends. She's pushing it though. She's right on that bubble. She's left freshman year. She's entering high school, and now I think she just wants the candy for the most part. But anyway, she's going out with some friends tonight. I'll be staying at home at Stately Stigall Manor and minding the door. But anyway, I hope everybody that, however you spend it, however you're enjoying today, I hope it's a safe one for you, and thanks for being here. I hope also if you buy your own health insurance, no trick here. This is all treat. This is all upside. When you call John Ruhlman and tell him, hey, I'm about to enroll in health insurance again this year at work, what do you have for me? John will go to work fanning out over 80 different private health insurers out there. And what he will do is research the very best rates and the best coverages for you, your family, maybe your employees, if you buy your small business employees their own health insurance. It's his obsession. His singular focus is saving you money, but not cutting costs on coverage. Okay. So yeah, making it cheaper, but not, like you're more out of pocket or it doesn't cover as much as your current insurance does. I know a lot of people, in fact, my parents are guilty of this. They say, well, yeah, we pay a lot, but it covers everything and we really need it. Well, okay. What if there was an insurance policy out there that covers everything and is less money? Have you shopped it? Really? I know a lot of people hate the bureaucracy. Look, I just like what I like. I got set up years ago. Don't bother me with it. I totally get that. I'm that guy. But that's why John and his care team exist. They take care of all of it. They handle all the bureaucracy. They dot all the I's and cross all the T's so you can go about your day. And monthly, what you're paying out of pocket for your health insurance premium is like 30 to 60% less at least. Take some money off your bottom line. Take some money off your bottom line household expenses if you buy your own insurance. Get health insurance if you don't have it. There's no good reason to not have health insurance. There's still plenty of private sector options out there. John Ruhlman and his team at usmedicalplan.com can tell you what they are. usmedicalplan.com or 877-410-4321. Report this morning that the lunatic that killed 18 people up there in Maine, just heard this morning that his ex-wife and son and the guy that ran the base where he served as a National Guardsman, all of them, son, ex-wife, and direct, I guess if you want, supervisor on base, all went to law enforcement, said the guy's a lunatic and has access to firearms. He's lost his ever-loving mind. I think he's going to do serious damage and harm. Just letting you know. What more, sincere question, what more do you do? I feel like we've had this show and this discussion before. What more do you do? The notion that would be an access to guns issue at that point? Everyone in law enforcement was told, I mean, you can't get, they did everything right. I would imagine the people closest to him must feel sick. What must you feel? Seriously, think about it for a minute. What must you feel if you know someone you love or know or are related to? You know they are unhinged, and you know they have firearms, and you know they have said very specifically they intend to assassinate people. And you go to law enforcement and you say, my relative, my loved one, my friend has access to firearms, and he is really unstable and says he's going to shoot people. You've done your due diligence, have you not? You've done everything you can, and then he does it anyway, kills 18 people. What are you feeling at that point? Are you mad? Are you sick? What are you feeling? I'd love a follow-up interview with those people, wouldn't you? In all this gun control madness, this conversation about gun control in the country, wouldn't you love to follow up with the people who went and warned law enforcement, my loved one, my dad, my subordinate, my ex-husband is certifiably unhinged and is pledged he's going to kill people and has access to firearms. He can do it. I want you to know. I want to follow up with those people, sincerely. Whenever they're mentally ready to do it, I would love a sit-down interview. What do you think of the country today? What do you think of the system today? You did your part. You warned your fellow citizens, and this guy you warned everybody about did what he promised he'd do, and no one stopped him. Is it a fair discussion to have about guns? And I'll bet you money, I'll just bet you money those people do not say the gun is what has them bothered at this hour. That's my hunch. Just wanted to put a bow on that. I don't have much more to say about it other than that, but that is the latest on that story. People closest to him knew exactly who he was, knew exactly what he intended to do, and knew exactly that he had the capability to do it, and they warned all the appropriate authorities. And still, nothing was done. Look, I don't have the perfect answer on something like that, but you'll note that the calls for gun control have quieted dramatically since that story has come to light, since he ended up taking his own life, I guess, offed himself in a shed or something over the weekend. We didn't talk about it yesterday. But the story is now turning to all that we knew about the guy well in advance, and nothing was done. So that's infuriating. That's very, very frustrating. I cannot, all I think about are the survivors, his family, his loved ones, his dad, or his son, rather, his ex-wife, warning people. Anyway. Catherine Herridge of CBS News now. She was at Fox News for a long while, if you remember. I liked her a lot. Catherine Herridge is facing contempt charges from an Obama judge. If you'll remember, it was an Obama judge that gave our good friend Cheryl Atkinson so much trouble. It's the Obama era that led to people like James Rosen and Cheryl Atkinson being spied on and surveilled for their reporting. Similar deal here. In August, U.S. District Court judge in D.C., a guy called Christopher Cooper, ordered Herridge to sit down for a sworn deposition regarding all confidential sources she used in a 2017 story she covered on a Department of Defense-funded school that was at the center of federal investigations over Chinese military ties. Judge ordered Herridge to turn over her sources in response to a lawsuit that was filed by a Chinese-American scientist against the FBI. Guy called Chen. Chen subpoenaed Herridge in an effort to find out who her sources were. Now, I guess I don't have to tell you that in this country, the press does not have to turn over their sources. We have this thing called the First Amendment. I don't know if I have to reacquaint some of you with this, but just in case I do, you should know that when we used to do journalism in this country, journalists had a right to protect their sources, and they did not have to disclose them. This Obama-era judge is saying that she does now. Judge Cooper, an Obama appointee, forcing Herridge to unmask her source. The court recognizes both the vital importance of a free press and the critical role the confidential sources play in the work of investigative journalists, but applying the binding case law of this circuit, the court concludes that Chen's need for the requested evidence overcomes Herridge's qualified First Amendment privilege in this case. Interesting. So an Obama-era judge believes the First Amendment can take a backseat. Does that shock you? Probably shouldn't. Herridge has refused to disclose her source. Good for her during the deposition. Now she faces contempt charges and potential jail time. Well, I'd be more than happy to hold a fundraiser to help her. With contempt charges now teed up, one of the two outcomes likely: either Herridge will be held in contempt in the near future and can immediately appeal that order, or, as sometimes occurs in these cases, the sources may release Herridge from the privilege rather than watch her undergo the consequences of contempt, meaning she'd go to her sources and say, hey, they want to throw me in jail because I won't tell them who you were. How does that make you feel? And the source can go, oh, Catherine, don't go to jail over it. It's okay. Go ahead and tell them who I am. But that's a pretty disgusting place to have to be in this country, that a journalist would have to go to her source and beg them to make it okay to reveal their identity so she doesn't go to prison. So I hope she continues to fight. Look, these things are legally draining, but this just continues to underscore that people who are actual journalists in this country are continuing to be punished. They continue to be targets. This is a woman reporting on the Chinese infiltrating our institutions, and so naturally an Obama-era judge wants to punish her. I suspect she will appeal. Hopefully she has the resources and the means and the support to do it. And I hope it makes its way all the way to the Supreme Court, where I suspect the Supreme Court will side with her ultimately, which will be a delight. But in the meantime, it brings me no joy to watch somebody like her, who's an above-board, legitimate journalist, who did legitimate reporting and is legitimately trying to support not just the First Amendment, but her confidential sources. It continues to be a troubling sign that the judiciary, as appointed by the Obama era under which we're currently living, has no respect for the First Amendment whatsoever. Speaking of courts and the Obama era administration under which we live, 56% disapproval for the husk and the third term of Barack Obama. President Biden's disapproval rating among Americans now sitting at 56%, according to a poll released yesterday. This is a poll of registered voters, not likely, but registered voters. That means anybody who's on the rolls, anybody who's ever voted ever in their lives. This is more akin to the knuckle-dragging sector that I talked to you about, which is why it's more instructive, actually. This is more sort of a snap poll of public sentiment rather than a snap poll of what will likely happen at the ballot box. So when you're talking about things like this again, what tells me this is important is the sentiment of the country. Even the knuckle-draggers who don't pay attention like you and me, they know what we're living through. We're getting up near 60% of the country who's just living here every day, whether they vote or participate this fall and next fall or not. They disapprove of the husk and the administration, broken down by party. 85% of Democrats, 40% of independents, 10% of Republicans approve of Biden. You imagine that there's 10% of people that call themselves Republicans that would approve of this? Broken down by age. 18 to 34-year-olds gave Biden the highest marks, 48%. Respondents 35 to 55 gave Biden a 45% approval. Those 55 years of age and up gave him a 42% approval. Blacks gave Biden their highest approval marks, 61%. Hispanic and Asian voters both gave Biden 55% approval rating. White voters, 42% approval. Speaking of the Chinese and their influence, this might explain why Obama-era judges are so eager to get rid of people like Catherine Herridge. Because the Husk's son is on the take. So is the Husk himself. The entire family is propped up by Chinese money. This government has been infiltrated by the Chinese. There's no doubt about it. We have a president and a family who are compromised by the Chinese government. Chinese spy balloon, 8 days? Hello? You think that's a coincidence? You think that's odd, don't you? That a Chinese spy balloon would be able to fly over the continental United States for 8 days, surveilling, taking in data, and nothing done about it? You think that's weird? You'd think that's not normal. Why would we allow that? Well, this is why. Hunter Biden received a $250,000 loan from a Chinese businessman 3 months after his dad launched his 2020 presidential campaign. Yet another transaction. Just another. It's not the only, it's not the biggest, but it's yet another. These Chinese people are like an ATM to the Biden family. It's the most remarkable thing. Whenever they need cash infusions, they go straight to the Chinese. So if you wonder why you see people like Gavin Newsom over there cozying up to Xi, and if you wonder why the Chinese spy balloon, if you wonder why no meaningful moves on COVID, if you wonder why no meaningful restoration of trade restrictions and tariffs, and in fact, removing many of the Trump era, if you wonder why, this is why. The House Oversight Committee first disclosing a few weeks ago, Biden had gotten a $250,000 wire in 2019 and used his father's address in Delaware for the transfer. It was one of the later known foreign payments Biden received after he fell on hard times. Documents gathered by federal law enforcement and reviewed by Just the News show Hunter Biden considered the wire to be a loan from this Chinese businessman who he'd been doing business with for over a decade when they created an investment fund under the name Bohai Harvest RST. After Joe Biden became president, the records show Hunter transferred the debt to somebody called Kevin Morris, Hollywood lawyer whom he befriended after they met at a November 2019 Biden campaign fundraiser in L.A. The debt was assumed by this Hollywood attorney when the lawyer acquired Hunter Biden's stake in the partnership and a separate company that they'd set up on the side, some flim-flam company. This is amazing. Morris's assumption of the debt obligation is only part of millions of dollars in assistance the lawyer, a Democrat donor, has given to Hunter since the two met. I'll say one thing. This guy has a hell of a lot of good friends. I don't know how many people you can call up and say, well, I guess if my dad's about to be president, maybe that opens a few more doors. You suppose? The relationship now under investigation by Congress, most of this Hollywood agent or attorney's assistance is in the form of loans. Morris has been a member of Hunter Biden's legal team from time to time. I wonder if that's not the guy that's out there smoking the bong while they're having the meetings in L.A., is it? Probably part of that team anyway. House Oversight and Accountability Committee Chairman James Comer telling Just the News, it sure seems the Bidens get a lot of loans that raise a lot of questions. Hunter Biden's defense team quick to say the $250,000 wire received from a Chinese national listed Joe Biden's home as the beneficiary address, and it was a loan. Hunter Biden's defense team fails to mention Kevin Morris quietly assumed that loan. Scumbags. Filthy scumbags. Over at Forbes, most Americans support Israel over Hamas and have given President Biden some of his best job approval ratings for being a vocal ally of Israel and their right to defend themselves after being attacked on October 7th. But almost half of Americans between the ages of 18 and 24 side with Hamas. So in that earlier poll, if you wonder to yourself, how is it that young people support this husk to such a degree? Well, you should also know that young people in this country side with terrorists. So that should be of little comfort to Joe Biden, although I suppose if enough of them turn out come Election Day. Almost a third of 18 to 24-year-olds polled deny militants shot, raped, or beheaded Israelis during the attack. How do you like that for a stat, Fast Eddie? 18 to 24-year-olds, a third of them surveyed, according to Mark Penn, Harvard Capps Harris poll. A third of 18 to 24-year-olds deny Hamas shot, raped, beheaded Israelis in an attack on October 7th. They flat out deny it even happened, Fast Eddie.
Okay, so this generation now coming up is going to be the next deniers of things like the Holocaust, like 9/11 now, or we're seriously talking about denying what we saw with our own eyes, which Hamas filmed, by the way.
Yeah. I don't believe it. It didn't happen. Mark Penn, again, rebellion has been the typical mantra at university, but we're seeing something very different now, he says. Young people are in an information envelope of their own. I've rarely seen an issue that is more generationally focused than party-focused in the last few years. That said, some politicians are benefiting from taking a strong stance in support of Israel. Biden is one. 58% of those polled saying they approve of the job he's done on Israel. One person not benefiting, according to the poll, is Trump because of what Penn describes as his inability to get back on the international stage on an issue that should have been a layup for him. The person who did step up is GOP nominee and former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Boy, they are pushing Haley. Look, Trump isn't allowed or able to talk about anything but his legal woes, and that's all and the only way in which any media will talk about Donald Trump, which is why I know a lot of you in this audience say that's why he shouldn't be the nominee. But when this pollster says Trump can't get a footing to talk about Israel, well, I mean, he has, if you read his social media and you follow him. If you consume mainstream media, you wouldn't know that. But boy, are they intent on pushing Nikki Haley, pivoting now to the Republican field. They're basically throwing DeSantis under the bus now, Fast Eddie. Mainstream press has decided that DeSantis is not going to be the foil to Trump they'd hoped. And so now they're basically clamoring for DeSantis to step down, get real, understand the writing on the wall, step aside, because here comes Nikki Haley. That's the new push from Axios today. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley on the rise. Tied for second in the NBC News Des Moines Register poll there in Iowa of likely caucus goers. Haley and Ron DeSantis are tied at 16%. So by Haley being on the rise, that means she's risen to tie DeSantis. Not that she's defeating DeSantis, she's tied DeSantis. So naturally, they've concluded DeSantis should get out of the way. How exactly do you arrive at that math?
In how many states, Chris?
Yeah, just Iowa.
Okay.
Yeah, in one. That's right. Not even in her own state, by the way. I haven't seen, in fact, let me see. Do I have anyone? I've not seen a South Carolina poll, but my understanding is that's where she's the former governor. DeSantis leads her there in her own home state. Might be wrong. That could have changed, but that was the last I saw, I don't know, maybe more than a month ago. Haley was at 6% in the first poll in August. DeSantis was at 19%. Vivek Ramaswamy, Chris Christie tied at 4%. And as you know, Mike Pence has dropped out. This is the first in the nation caucus, as you know, which is why people are paying attention to this. Back in 2016, Trump came in a close second in Iowa to Ted Cruz before winning New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada. 41% of those in this Iowa caucus poll said their mind is made up. 63% of those are Trump supporters, and they say they are locked in. That's double the share of Haley and DeSantis supporters who are done shopping for a candidate. So the bottom line, even Axios has to say, here's their bottom line. This is a good poll for Donald Trump. So neither of them are sniffing Trump yet in Iowa, but yet they're trying to make it sound like DeSantis is the one that should step aside. And I don't know how they arrive at this. But everybody's saying now that Nikki Haley, this is the world built for her. Now is her time to rise. Another Axios piece. It's time already. I told Fast Eddie yesterday when Pence got out, you would inevitably start to hear and see the stories. It's time for us to coalesce. It's time for us to get out of the way. It's time for us to circle around. Didn't I tell you this yesterday? They were going to start saying this.
Chris, I was scanning Axios early this morning. I'm like, no way. You literally said it. Was it off air? Were we talking?
It was right after the show yesterday. I told you with Pence getting out, that means we're going to start reading stories. Time to coalesce around somebody to take Trump down.
Here we are.
Here we are. The GOP primary has officially entered the season of consolidation. Which again explains the get out of the way, Ron. It's Nikki's show now. A race within a race that will test the ego and rationality of every candidate committed to stopping Donald Trump from winning the nomination. So you see, now for the first time, the rest of the field who wants to be president of the United States are ego-driven and selfish. And which of them are going to lay down their egos and their selfishness to understand the greater, more important good at hand? At all costs, stopping Donald Trump. This, beyond all other metrics, is the most important of all metrics. How do we stop Donald Trump from becoming the Republican nominee? Never mind that these people may have their own sincerely held convictions and beliefs about being the next president of the United States. Never mind these people believe they have their own vision and their own way forward. Never mind that some of these people genuinely believe they'd make a better president. It's not about defeating Trump. It's about becoming the nominee and winning the votes of the Republican voter. No. Set all that aside. Now the press will begin to say, hey, look, Pence, his Veep, got out of the way. Like, that's his Veep, guys. If his Veep's getting out of the way, isn't it time for all of you to set your egos aside? If his Veep can't do it, you guys can't do it. So why don't you do the right thing? Step aside, consolidate your forces, your money, the support that you have, and let's build one super candidate to finally take this ogre out once and for all. Huh? What do you say? Look, if there's anybody who should be forced to do that, it's Chris Christie. He's the one that's been saying from the very beginning his sole existence is to thwart Donald Trump. He's the one that should get the hell out of the way and donate his money to DeSantis or Haley right now. If I'm going to pick one to just get out of the way, I think the others have genuinely held convictions that they should be president of the United States. I don't think he does. I don't think he ever did. But they like him hanging around. Notice they'll never invoke his name to stand aside or get out of the way. They like him on all the cable shows, taking a mallet to Trump every day. Long shot candidates Larry Elder, Perry Johnson, Will Hurd of Texas also suspended their campaigns, along with Jack Asa and now Mike Pence. And I shared with you the Iowa polling information. So there you have it now. You're basically talking about three players at this point. Trump, of course, followed by DeSantis and Haley. Press today now telling DeSantis, get out of the way. Give it to Haley.
Christie, you stay. You stay right where you are.
Yeah, Chris, you can hang out just because we like your sound bites. All the rest of you, get out of here. Give all your support to Nikki Haley. What scumbags? Trump really can't find his footing on Israel. As if you're interested in anything Trump is saying about anything. Other than, well, hell, out in Colorado, they're trying to keep him off the ballot, as you know. Whether former President Trump instigated the January 6th Capitol attack is at the core of a Colorado lawsuit, this from The Hill, seeking to disqualify him from the ballot under the 14th Amendment's insurrection clause. Opening remarks in the trial began yesterday, where something called Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington and 6 Colorado voters arguing that Trump incited a violent mob to attack the Capitol to stop the peaceful transfer of power under our Constitution. Can you believe in the United States? Well, maybe you can, because this is where we are in 2023. It is, you couldn't have made this up. 5 years ago, if you'd told me there would be a state holding a legitimate trial to discuss whether or not the former president of the United States should be allowed to be on the ballot in the state. If you told me that 5 years ago, I'd have said, no way. That's kookery. There's no way a courtroom in the land would doubt the legitimacy of a former president running for a second term on a state ballot. No way you could get there. Here we are. Colorado having a legitimate legal debate as to whether Trump should appear on their ballot. I mean, that would be appealed ultimately. And again, the Supreme Court, thank God we have a Supreme Court that's sane and would overturn something like this, I suspect. Hopefully it won't get there. But that's the state of play. I hope you heard my conversation with Dinesh D'Souza on the most recent show, I think this week. All the days run together. I don't remember exactly when we talked to Dinesh. I think it was this week or maybe last. But anyway, you heard me talking to you and him about his new film, Police State. PoliceStateFilm.net is the website if you want to see the trailer. PoliceStateFilm.net. Now, Dinesh and this film seek to chronicle the relentless persecution of the conservative movement in this country using the heavy, strong-arm tactics of the DOJ. The America we know and love is becoming more and more like a police state every day, threatening people like you and me who speak our minds and stand up for freedom of speech and freedom of religion. And so Dinesh D'Souza has directed this film, Police State, in an attempt to sound the alarm. If you demand your freedom, it's likely they're coming after you, or they're certainly watching. I mean, we all see that. We've seen that with just about everybody who was even present on January 6th in Washington, D.C., 2020. How did we get here? And how do we turn the tide of a tyrannical government's agenda? Well, this movie goes a long way into chronicling it and perhaps talking about how we can reverse course. It's called Police State by Dinesh D'Souza. You can stream it now, right now, PoliceStateFilm.net. Hope you'll watch it, PoliceStateFilm.net. It's a pleasure to welcome her back. I think every time she appears on the show, I get more correspondence from people on X, formerly Twitter. I get notes from people. They're always so encouraged to hear someone who I guess maybe comes from a different point of view, but is always willing to have an open conversation, and Dr. Naomi Wolf is certainly that. She has authored a brand new book that's it's coming out very soon. November 9th is the release date. Facing the Beast, Courage, Faith, and Resistance in a New Dark Age. Dr. Wolf, Naomi, great to have you back.
Thanks so much. And yes, please call me Naomi, and I will call you Chris if I may. Thank you. It's good to talk.
Although I will tell you, if I earned a doctorate, I would probably demand people call me doctor. I'm that kind of hoity-toity. I might do it. I might.
Well, I do throw it around quite a lot, but for my friends, I like calling it's good to have a choice.
Well, it is great to have you back. I can't wait to hear about the book and dive into it. I know this audience has been really interested in the things, particularly in the COVID era, that you've had to say. Do you describe yourself? I've asked you this before, but I think it's interesting for people to hear. Politically today, how do you describe yourself? Where have you, because I think people kind of read that perhaps, is it fair to say you've evolved a little bit politically in the last few years?
Well, I feel like I've stayed in exactly the same place in terms of what motivates me, but it's definitely true that I've had to re-examine a lot of kind of policies and historic events that I thought I understood after I got kicked out of my niche as a liberal, media fixture by posting something that was true on Twitter in June of 2021 about women having menstrual problems subsequent to mRNA injections. And after that, I was kind of unpersoned by my own tribe, essentially. But the people who wanted to talk to me were conservatives and libertarians and a lot of religious leaders on the conservative side. And I learned from them so much that this book is really about my journey of kind of re-examining my beliefs. So I still think I'm a classical liberal, but the book Facing the Beast shows that, on issues ranging from the Russia hoax to the Steele dossier to narrative of January 6th to the Second Amendment, I believed a lot of things that are not true, and I've had to update my views.
And if you don't mind sharing it, if it's personal, you don't have to. I ask only because it's just interesting as to kind of build a framework as to who you are and how you see the world. Are you of a personal faith? Do you have any kind of faith background or adhere to any particular religion today?
That is totally fair, especially because I put faith in the subtitle. So, fair question. I'm Jewish. I was raised conservative Jewish, which is not as Orthodox Jewish. But I feel like, a lot of people are going to get mad at me, but I feel as if we're in a time when those labels are really not very important, just like the labels of left and right, I think are increasingly unimportant, because I've come to believe, and this is part of my journey that I describe in the book, that we're really in a time where normal politics and normal history can't explain what's happening around us. Ranging from the lockstep of every leader in every nation during the lockdown years to the genocide that my team of researchers, the War Room Daily Cloud team, have identified in the Pfizer documents, the sterilization of the next generation, the way that, and I go into this in detail in Facing the Beast, the way that, liberals and, readers of the New York Times and followers of CNN really went into a kind of and are still to some extent in a kind of hypnotic delusion where no amount of facts can get through to them. I've never seen anything like this before in my life, and I study history very carefully, and I study totalitarianism, very carefully. I wrote a book about it in 2008 called The End of America, and history doesn't work like this. There are always factions or renegades or rich people who don't need the money and won't go along with it, or dissent or assassination attempts. Never has a giant evil enveloped the whole world and made people dance to it, in unison, like the Sorcerer's Apprentice. So I've concluded that the history we're seeing is really a symptom of something bigger, which is metaphysical. And it's a battle between good and evil in which I've concluded, and this is like very preliminary and I'm not proselytizing. This is just like groping in the dark, really. But that I've concluded that kind of the Judeo-Christian covenant has been kind of abandoned by us.
Yes.
And that a rush of what you can only call evil forces have, moved in that abandonment, given full reign since 2020. I'm actually influenced by Jonathan Cahn, a Messianic pastor who, meaning a Jewish pastor, a Jewish Christ-believing pastor who made the case and have odds that these dark forces are actually like pre-Christian, pre-Jewish forces like Baal and Moloch and Asherah. And like, again, the names don't really matter. I think we can all feel the dominion of evil, inverting our institutions, turning hospitals that supported life and healing into hospitals that, mass scale administer protocols of death, nations like Canada endorsing assisted suicide, all the way down to depressed teens, new bills that I've read and seen that make it not a crime to neglect a newborn baby to death, right? All of these things are new, and they're all violations of our Judeo-Christian morals. And so I have concluded that this is a metaphysical struggle, and I do kind of follow Jesus as a rabbi, and whatever else he may have been, which I'm still struggling with. But I think of myself as Jewish, but I also, as I said earlier, don't really think that matters right now. Right now, what we're seeing is left and right are so much less important than people realizing that the Constitution and America is at stake, and we need to unite, whatever our lesser differences are, to save those. So right now, it's like, are you a good person? Are you fighting evil? Are you trying to save people from death? You're on my side. I don't care if you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew.
Yeah, it's interesting, particularly with what we've seen happen in Gaza. I am finding, even amongst some who I guess would either call themselves conservatives or libertarians, Just recently, somebody that kind of admonished me for calling out anti-Semitism and in saying, not everybody that lives in Israel is Jewish, Stigall. And I thought it's like that was from a fellow conservative, kind of making the case almost that there was, that bringing up the slaughter of Jews. I mean, most of Israel is Jewish, even though that is true. It's a statement of fact, but it's, I mean, as you say, this kind of spiritual darkness, I agree with you completely. I don't, there's a march. There's a march to aid and abet evil, and I just don't think it's deniable.
No, and I would say, thank you. And I think that the more we talk about that, the more equipped we'll be to figure out ways to fight it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I personally never used to really think prayer mattered, but now I actually think it's a weapon and an arsenal against these dark forces, and that it does matter and it does make a difference.
Have you seen, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Naomi, but have you seen the way people are reacting to Mike Johnson, the new Speaker of the House, talking about God and praying lately on the House floor? It's like they're freaking out that he's a Christian. It's really interesting.
Right. Well, but I do, as a Jew, I do want to I had this debate actually with my Catholic husband. I do want to warn people, like, there's a reason Jews traditionally vote for Democrats. And one of them is we are really nervous about state sanctioned religion because we've been fed into ovens. We've been, subjected to the Inquisition, forced conversion by people who believed they were doing God's will with a state-sanctioned religion. And being a religious minority throughout Europe with usually meant fewer civil rights, and that we were fair game for anyone. So I guess what I want to say is, it's really time to remember that the founders were very clear that this was a nation built on God's promise, and they invoked God all the time.
Yes.
But they were very careful to separate church and state, and not and make sure that everyone had freedom of conscience and freedom of religion. So I think it's beautiful to pray and on the House floor, whatever, to call for God's help. But when you say, like, in Jesus' name, amen, like, I really love Jesus, but that is like not what the founders intended.
Yes.
For
back to your original point, though, and generally I agree with you completely. And I think if people do not recognize God and don't recognize a creator, then you cannot acknowledge and recognize evil. It doesn't. People that don't define or recognize evil don't probably acknowledge a creator either, I suppose.
I mean, I've been on the left my whole life, and they have many gymnastics for explaining that they are moral people in the absence of or antagonistic toward the idea of a creator, or just thinking it's not polite to mention it's not polite to mention in polite society the idea of a creator. So I think secular people can believe they're moral for sure, but I agree right now that we're in existential peril. Like, I think God has kind of said, you know what, you want to do it yourself, this is what it looks like, and has literally withdrawn. And I actually just posted a really interesting essay by an Orthodox Jew where apparently, like, Kabbalism, real Kabbalism, Orthodox Judaism, understands that there are times that God hides his face and kind of leaves humans to their own wicked devices. And I do feel like that's the time we're in, and we are going to need to, we could, like, the kind of genocidal science. We just broke a story on top of other research other people have broken, showing that there's a carcinogen intentionally added to the mRNA injections, as well as DNA fragments and plasmids grown in E. coli. And we've shown, Amy Kelly, my COO, has a piece just up yesterday showing that the FDA let Pfizer redact all of the chapters about the manufacturing process and how they keep it from being contaminated, how do they ensure purification and stabilization. Hundreds and hundreds of pages are redacted. So they knew, either Pfizer tricked the FDA and now the FDA is covering up, or the FDA knew from the start that there were carcinogens, SB40, which OSHA calls a carcinogen, in these injections. And now there are turbo cancers everywhere, and young people's cancers have quadrupled. So I sort of feel like we're in this kind of extinction level moment if we just try to fix this ourselves. And that this is one of those moments where God is like, all right, you wanted to like ignore me, pollute the earth, ignore your family, not cherish babies. This is what that looks like. This is, now the babies are all dead. You didn't think, you weren't grateful for health. Now you have no health. You ignored your family. Now you're all locked in rooms, completely alienated from each other. And there's been a division that destroys families. I mean, on and on and on, right? It's like you wanted all of this. You were on this road. Go for it. So I guess I sort of feel like this is a kind of a wake-up call. Dr. Zelenko, the late Dr. Zelenko, said humanity would face a test, and it feels like a test, and we're not going to get out of it if we don't. And I'm not proselytizing, just me personally. I feel like I won't survive, and my family won't survive if we don't ask for God's help.
Facing the Beast is Dr. Naomi Wolf's book, Courage, Faith, and Resistance in a New Dark Age. I know your time is tight. I want to ask you briefly, because we talked about him before. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you say he's a friend, a personal friend. You've communicated. Since we talked, he was running as a Democrat. Now he's running as an independent. Could I get your reaction to that?
I'm so pleased. I mean, I don't want to overstate. I consider him a friend. He might consider me an acquaintance. A lot of people, a lot of people think they're my best friends, and I barely know who they are. So, bless him. But I hope we're friends. I really think the world of him. And I think he's so brave, and your audience may not know, it's important that there was an intruder in his house yesterday, twice, and he's still not being given Secret Service protection, which, speaking as a former White House spouse, is just criminal, negligence, like intentional, almost homicidal negligence on the part of the administration. I hoped that he would run as an independent. I actually recommended to unnamed people in his campaign early on strongly that he should run as an independent, because I knew the Democrats, and I knew they were never going to let him be the front runner ever. They'd make sure it wouldn't happen. So
when you read people like Rob Reiner, I mean, he's furious, livid. He says he's personally called RFK Jr. and said, "Don't you dare do this. You're going to cause us to lose." Said people like Rob Reiner.
I mean, I guess what I would say there is Rob Reiner is not the American public. They're the ones who get to decide who their president is. The founders didn't even set up a two-party system, or they didn't set up any political parties as part of our Constitution and our, tripartite structure. That those were later human inventions by people who wanted power. And, look at what a mafia tactic it is for anyone to tell anyone not to run for office. It's standing between the American public and the candidate they might want to consider for president. I do think he is going to cause the Democrats to lose, frankly. And I think that if that's the case, the Democrats should look in the mirror, because if people were happy with the Democrats, he wouldn't be polling so well.
So you don't think, because here's something I hear a lot from Republicans. They're pretty convinced that Trump folks will see him as Trump adjacent and vote for him, and that it will actually hurt Trump more than Biden.
Well, I personally think a dream ticket is Trump RFK Jr., and I think it's RFK Jr.'s quickest path to the presidency, after Trump's second term. So I think that would be, 65% of voters would vote for a Trump RFK Jr. ticket, and I hope they go that route.
You think that's possible?
Well, if RFK Jr. agrees, yes. And
Yeah.
if Trump knows, if Trump, I mean, how can I put this? It's hard to have two divas on one ticket.
Yeah, there may not be enough room for both of them, you mean, yeah.
But if Trump is really, really smart, he would tap him or seek him out as his VP, because it would be it's the only ticket that can break up the globalist power structure and the globalist plans for this country. And then I think also Trump would not have the fight that he's had in the past, just getting votes counted properly, because he'd win with such big margins.
Facing the Beast, Courage, Faith, and Resistance in a New Dark Age. She's Dr. Naomi Wolf. This book comes out on November 9th. We always enjoy the conversation. It's always thoughtful, and I hope we can have you back very soon. It's been my pleasure and honor to talk about Bob Spinato at Williamsburg Dental in Broomall, just off the Blue Route, as my dentist and friend of over 12 years. But now he has two brand new associates, his daughter Alexa and Dr. Geddes. Tell them about him, Bob.
Yeah, Chris, I can't begin to express how proud I am, obviously, of having my daughter there. also, Dr. Geddes is just a wonderful addition to our practice. He is a classmate of my daughter Alexa's at Temple Dental School, and I have known Jared for about 7 years now. Getting to know Jared over the years, it was my wife Debbie and my daughter Emily who kept telling me, "You have to hire Jared. You have to hire Jared. He's going to be a superstar." Jared went off to USC, did a 1-year residency after his year at Temple, and he came back and he worked for about a year in practice in New Jersey. And after, again, my wife and daughter beating my brains in, I got the message and I hired Jared, and he's been a great addition to Williamsburg Dental.
Pick up the phone or go online, make that appointment, 610-353-2700 or williamsburg-dental.com. The open hostility to people of faith in big ways and small is seen in just in maybe subtle ways. I bet most people didn't even pick up on this. I was very impressed that you did. You should tell it because I didn't. It centers around the movie The Exorcist, which I didn't see the original one back in 1973, did you say?
Yep.
I didn't see that one, to be honest. I know what it is. I understand the premise. I've seen the parodies of it and that sort of thing. And then there's a new one out now, right? The Exorcist?
Yep, it's called The Exorcist Believer.
And what is it supposed to be? Like
So it's 50 years after the events of the original Exorcist. So they ignore everything in between it. So there's the only two movies that exist in this universe are The Exorcist 1973 and The Exorcist Believer.
All right, so just for a brief recap, the original Exorcist. The plot?
So the original Exorcist it's the ultimate battle of good versus evil. So she's an actress. Ellen Burstyn is the actress, but in the movie she plays an actress, Chris McNeil. Her daughter Reagan, after playing with the Ouija board, becomes possessed by a demon.
Played by Linda Blair, right?
Played by Linda Blair, correct. So in the beginning of the movie, you see a priest, Father Merrin. He's actually in Iraq, and they're digging up religious artifacts. He encounters this demon when they're doing that. Like, it's part of an architectural dig. So anyway, by the time we get to the end of the movie, not to give it away, but it becomes Father Merrin and Father Karras, who is another priest that we meet throughout the film, and their battle to exorcise Linda Blair of this demon Pazuzu.
Catholic priests versus the demon. That's how the movie concludes.
And it's important to note that Ellen Burstyn's character is not religious. That's important. She's not a religious person. Linda Blair goes through all these tests. Nobody can explain it in the psychological field what's happening. The only conclusion you can come to is that she is, in fact, possessed by a demon.
Now, you're big into these, and you study these films and kind of the history of them and this, the fan bases around them and the cultural phenomenons that surround them. You said that after this original Exorcist film, and I'll just take your word for it because I don't know. You said that there was a renewed interest in church worship and attendance after this film. Is that right?
Yep. People were going back to church. And Chris, this isn't your run-of-the-mill horror film. This was an Academy Award-winning film, The Exorcist. So it was serious. It hit big.
I mean, it's from 1973, so I didn't even see it, but I think we all understand good wins the day in that original film. The priests exorcise the demon, good prevails, right? Ish?
Yes. It's in a way. It's very hard to explain.
But you would say, fair to say that it elevates the strength of the priests, their faith,
yes,
in driving demonic possession away.
Yep, you're correct.
Okay. Having said all that, the reason we're setting this up is because you went to see this new one that's out in theaters now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you noted something to me in passing that I thought was so fascinating. It dovetails nicely with the conversation with Naomi here. You said that this new one actually does not elevate the faith the same way, and that in fact, I mean, again, you hate. I guess spoiler alert here. Is that it? Should we just say spoiler alert for people that are going to see it? Maybe now's the time to turn away or turn this off. For those of you who won't see it, I'm not ever going to see it, so I don't care. I asked Fast Eddie to go ahead and blow it for me. So Fast Eddie's about to blow the plot. All right. So if you're going to go see it, he's about to blow it. Go away. You've been warned. So for the rest of you that aren't interested, tell me how it ends.
All right, so there are 2 girls that are possessed, not just one, in this new movie, Exorcist Believer. This is 50 years after the event, after Linda Blair was exorcised of the demon Pazuzu. So now these 2 girls are possessed, but they take away the key element, like what is important in the first place in this fight in good versus evil. What they do is, now this is fiction. The original Exorcist was based on a true story. This is fiction completely. The Catholic Church rejects locally the priest that would perform the exorcism on the 2 girls. Like, so he brings evidence to the Vatican. They say, no, you are not to exorcise. Like, we don't approve of exorcism. So in place of that, they completely take the Catholic Church out of the exorcist process. So
you said they bring in a bunch of witch doctors and voodoo people and all that stuff.
Correct. The parents of the 2 girls are advised to bring in people from different cultures and different faiths to perform this exorcism in the absence of the Vatican being allowed to do it. So I'm looking here, a Baptist pastor, a Pentecostal preacher, a root work healer, and yes. So it was, and a voodoo doctor.
And none of them can get the job done. They're in there instead of the priest, and none of them are getting it done.
Yep.
And then you said the priest ultimately decides, heck with it, I'm going in anyway.
Yep. So the priest pulls up, and the actor who plays one of the fathers says, "The fight's in there, Father." So he finally gets the courage, and he goes in, and it's this big moment. He walks up to the 2 girls, starts giving the rites of exorcism, puts his hands on their heads to give them the blessings, and then the girls start twisting their neck, like in the original Exorcist. You know how the head turns around?
Yeah.
When they do that, that spins his head completely around. He breaks his neck and dies.
They kill the priest.
They kill the priest.
So, and does it ultimately end up that the demons get exorcised or not? Again, I'm not going to see it, and if you're into spoilers, then don't turn away. Again, you've been warned, turn away. But do they end up, how does it end?
This is a big spoiler. So one of them lives, one of them dies.
So would you say that the religious figures in this film are triumphant or not triumphant in description? You would say in the first one they were. You're saying in this one they were not.
In this one, they were not triumphant, no.
So the men of faith, the faith leaders in this film, were not triumphant over evil.
They weren't.
That's fascinating. I think that is a very subtle but interesting observation you just made there versus the original one.
But like the worst part is this moment, like it's Hollywood. So they build up this moment where the priest comes in just to have like the music. It's very dramatic. It's very intense just to have him killed off by the demons, showing like, look, this is what we think of you, Catholicism.
Yeah.
When that is literally that's the whole reason people were going back to church in the 1970s after seeing the original.
Well, it's what it says is Hollywood has elevated, evil over people of faith. That faith does not reign supreme. Good does not ultimately win. Hollywood saw fit to write a script and see out a film that has people of faith defeated. I think that's actually quite profound. Honestly, great catch by you. I would never have seen it, but it certainly drives home the point. Mike Lindell and MyPillow. What a great patriot. One guy that, for sure, everything he makes, everything he sells, you can guarantee not made in China. Nope, not at all. Now, look, he does sell a delicious coffee. He obviously is not growing the coffee beans here. So, full disclosure, that's maybe one of the few things at MyPillow that you won't find domestically grown, but certainly packaged and shipped as our MyPillow and the coffee specifically, the pods, the ground, and the beans. We order them here and drink it at the office regularly. I'm enjoying some this morning, as a matter of fact. The MyPillow products, which I was not I didn't own or possess any of them until this year, to be perfectly candid with you. And Mike and I partnered together to start talking about them, and so I ordered a few things. I ordered the Giza Dream sheets. I ordered that 3-foot body pillow that MyPillow makes. I sleep with it every night. I love it. As a side sleeper, it's the best. I rest my arm and elbow on it and put my knee up on it. It's like it gives great support if you're somebody that, is a side sleeper like I am. The MyPillow 2.0 Here's the deal. You'll get up to 80% just by using my name as a promo code when you go to MyPillow.com and type Chris. But on the MyPillow 2.0 specifically, this is covered in a fabric that's heat dissipating, so it keeps you cooler all night long if you're somebody that kind of runs hot at night. You'll get a second MyPillow 2.0 for free if you use my name, Chris, when you order one. And the mattress topper, which listeners have told me is like reinvigorating your mattress. It's like a brand new mattress at a fraction of the price. Mike's going to ship you that mattress topper for free if you order it. It's also covered in that same 2.0 material to keep you cool all night long. So whether it's the Giza Dream Sheets, the MyPillow 2.0, the mattress topper, the blanket. We just ordered a new waffle woven blanket from MyPillow, and we love it. Dean loves his MyPillow dog bed. Yeah, we're MyPillowed out at Stately Stigall Manor, and I hope you'll check it out too, with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee on everything you order. I know you're going to be very, very satisfied with the MyPillow products. It's like a mall online there. Go to MyPillow.com or call 800-932-5056. 800-932-5056, and remember the promo code Chris to save big money. I'm giving everybody a second here. Grab a pen if you need to. Grab your phone and type it in if you need to. Here's the number. You text 9487, or excuse me, you text the word win. Sorry, let me try it one more time. You text the word win, W-I-N, to 94878. All right, so you text the word win to 94878. You do that, you're instantly registered, instantly. And you could be notified. We're only taking entries until midnight tonight. So this is just a day-long contest. So if you don't hear about it today, that's it. Tell some other friends, by the way. Sidle up to somebody you know and make an agreement. Hey, I win, I'll take you. You win, you take me. All right, so again, text the word win to 94878. More details at 990theanswer.com. This is a trip to Miami, round trip and hotel and a gift card for next Wednesday's debate, hosted by Salem and Bing, Bing, Bing. One more time, the number, even though they're going to call you anyway, Fast Eddie. The number is, you text the word win to 94878. Good luck. There's nobody I trust more as we analyze what we're seeing unfolding as Israel moves in and advances on Gaza City. Nobody I trust more to give us a steely-eyed look at it than Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, president of the Herb London Center for Policy Research. He's author of Operation Dark Heart. You can follow him on X, formerly Twitter as well. Tony, it's a real pleasure to have you back this morning. Hi.
Hey, Chris. Always great to join you.
This is a stunning thing I just read this morning, and I want to start with this because it matters in the way we talk about it here domestically. 18 to 34-year-olds. There's a poll, a Harvard-Harris poll out today that says a third of 18 to, it might have been 18 to 24-year-olds, young people anyway, the youngest voters in our midst, a third of them don't believe attacks on Israel even happened. Tony. What do we do with that?
So we have a fundamental loss of information that is available to those who seek the truth. And frankly, I appreciate the way you rolled your show out this morning, and I'm sure that people who listen to you appreciate the fact that you're going to just put information out there that they may not like, but it's going to be truthful and complete. And this is what we're missing in 90% of the media. I look, like this morning before the show, I was going through my handful of sources I trust to try to figure out kind of what the ground truth is this morning. And I can tell you CNN, MSNBC, Fox are not among them. I don't look at them. I don't, because essentially so much of what they put out has been processed. And this is, I guess the best analogy is, if you eat processed food, if you go to the supermarket and you buy nothing but TV dinners, you're going to be in bad shape. And it's the same thing here. If you read processed news from major corporate outlets, they're going to be telling you what to think, not providing you the facts for you to figure it out.
Yes.
And I think that's where kids today have been, basically fed information from mainstream sources that seem to be completely bereft of any reality. And there is an effort, and let me be very clear on this. there is an effort by the global media to conspire with Hamas to essentially do a Jedi mind trick to pretend that the 7th of October never happened. And that's why you see the figures you see right now.
It is jarring. Mark Penn, quoted in Forbes, the pollster, the co-director of Harvard Capps Harris poll here, he said, rebellion's always been typical at university, but we're seeing something different now. Young people are in an information envelope all their own. I've rarely seen an issue that is more generationally focused than party focused like this one. There is something uniquely visceral and shocking to me, frankly, after these attacks. The way you saw college campuses erupt, and, certainly major metropolitan cities. I can't, in all the years, and I'm not an expert on it, you are, and I would certainly never pretend to know the deep history of it all. But in the time that I've covered news and talked politics, and this tension has come up in the past, I've always known there was some pro-Palestinian element. I've never seen it like this. It was almost as soon as the attack happened, it was like this torrent of pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian propaganda came pouring into our own streets, like a coordinated thing, was it?
Well, it's the basic concept of Marxism. The idea of cultural Marxism is to create them and us. And essentially, from what I've seen of the current set of kids in school today, in colleges, they are indoctrinated to believe that essentially the United States is evil, Israel is evil, everything Western is evil, and you have essentially, Che Guevara-type revolutions going on all over the world that they should support. And Hamas is one of those revolutions. And so, they're going to it's going to be very difficult for them to go against anything that they've been taught relating to this idea that all of these smaller terrorist groups are simply seeking to be free, freedom fighters. And then you have the mainstream media reinforcing that by essentially creating the doubt regarding what actually happened. It reinforces their paranoid ideas that somehow that the good guys are Hamas and we on our side are all evil, and they've doubled and tripled down. I said this yesterday on an interview. I have a number of when I went to Wright State University in Dayton back in from 82 to 86, I was friends with and still am to this day with liberal college professors. And God bless him. Dr. Jim Walker, I mentioned yesterday, he's a liberal. He's a Tulsi Gabbard type liberal. He basically was free speech, all about the idea of dialogue and debate and thinking. Those liberals are gone and been replaced by progressives. You do not create conditions for people to be challenged. They are dictated to. And so this is what you're seeing, Chris, is the end result of indoctrination versus education. Indoctrination simply is putting out a line of thinking that is adhered to, and if you don't adhere to it, you don't pass. If you don't pass, you don't get your degree, and that's why you see what you're seeing right now regarding this across-the-board thing. So is it organized? It's organized by the fact that the founding concept of their education is Marxist in nature, and they become really good Marxists.
And I know it goes without saying to people that are paying any bit of attention, Islamo-fascists hate American progressives. Let's just be clear. Like, you're flag waving, you're flag waving LGBTQ trans feminist types. They would be the first thrown off of buildings and subjugated under these Islamo-fascist rules if these Hamas people they're cheering got their way.
Well, that's the grand irony of all this. Is like, you all know that you're cheering on an organization that would essentially take you and, do the equivalent of putting you in gas chambers with Zyklon B as soon as they got you. I mean, that's the grand irony. And I've used this analogy as well, Chris. I mean, imagine, if you will, General Patton's Third Army rolling up on Auschwitz and all these other concentration camps, announcing to the world as they did what happened. And imagine college students coming into Times Square in 1944 and cheering the Nazis. Think about that.
Yeah.
That's that's what we're seeing here. When you hear Hamas, think of Nazi, because it's the same basic severe concept. I know I'm mixing metaphors here between Marxism and Nazism, but it's all a form of socialism and Marxism, using a very severe construct of ideals that relate to collective thought and collective action. And so, yeah, the progressives today are essentially, out there trying to promote the very thing that would see them dead if Hamas actually fulfills its dream of destroying Israel and then coming after us, which they said they want to do.
Colonel, the importance of Israel. If you just had young people in front of you right now, I know there are a lot of young parents that listen and they're trying to think to themselves, how do I teach my kids about the Middle East? What is the importance, if you were to tell young people, I don't know, you had a bunch of high school kids in front of you today who really don't know, and I would suspect that's probably a good chunk of high school kids in this country. What's the importance of Israel? Can you crystallize that for us?
Well, so, I'm doing this, I have my 17-year-old son, which we're going through this right now, as a matter of fact. I sat him down and we watched Lawrence of Arabia. It's like, look, you need to understand some things and just watch this movie. It's a very expensive movie. I like the movie. It talks about Sykes-Picot, the Balfour Agreement, and how the modern problems got set up by the fact that the Israeli state came out of 1917 and agreements the British made to both give the Arabs and the Israelis the same land. So obviously it set up a lot of problems that we're still faced with. So I think they have to understand that, there's conflict. The conflict is based on the fact that two people claim the same space in the Middle East. And I try to then further explain the Israelis are the ones who actually have been there longer. They're the ones who, had to get expelled from Egypt, Moses, the Pharaoh. And I think, Chris, there's a place called Jerusalem. Well, apparently it's in the name, Jerusalem. So, it's kind of like they've been there way longer than than the Muslims. And so that's my belief, is that they do have that right to be there, no matter how it is completely misportrayed by the media, saying that, the Israelis are, quote unquote, occupiers. No, I think they've been there longer. That area has been in dispute for a long time. How I distinguish my support for Israel over any other group in the Middle East is the Israelis have been trying to pursue Western civilization in the region since they got there, since they established their state. They've done their best to establish essentially a democracy that promotes all of the egalitarian concepts of Western civilization, and they do their best, to do those necessary things to bring order, stability, prosperity to their people. The Arabs just don't.
And isn't that amazing? If you really, I didn't really think about this or know it until somebody pointed it out to me. The geography of Gaza is just spectacular. If they capitalized on it the way Israelis do.
Yeah. Before the Israelis left, apparently it was an amazing place. Back in 2005, they had farms, they had progress. And Chris, look, that's what I believe the Israelis were going for in Oslo, too, in 94 when it was signed. It's like, okay, we're not going to officially sign up to two states because it's not politically feasible, but here you go. Here's some territory you can go make something of and actually see if you can create your own economic prosperity. And they didn't. Instead of doing the things necessary to create civilization, they've literally gone back to the Stone Age and are trying to stone Israelis and their tanks as they move through the Gaza area. So, and literally, they've gone. That's where they're at.
So Netanyahu said yesterday, it's been played quite a bit, as a matter of fact, on a ceasefire. Here's a little of it. We won't play it all, but I wanted to play a little of Netanyahu to get your reaction here to the idea of, hey, stand down, slow your roll here, Netanyahu. Take a listen.
In fighting Hamas and the Iranian axis of terror, Israel is fighting the enemies of civilization itself. Victory over these enemies begins with moral clarity. It begins with knowing the difference between good and evil, between right and wrong. It means making a moral distinction between the deliberate murder of the innocent and the unintentional casualties that accompany every legitimate war, even the most just war. It means holding Hamas responsible for the double war crime it commits every day by deliberately targeting Israeli civilians while deliberately using Palestinian civilians as human shields. It means making clear that the use of human shields is not only an immoral tactic of terror, but also an ineffective one. Because as long as Hamas's use of Palestinian human shields result in the international community blaming Israel, Hamas will continue to use it as a tool of terror, and so will others. Hamas will continue to use the basements in Gaza's hospitals as the command posts of its vast terror tunnel network. It will continue to use mosques as fortified military positions and weapon depots. It will continue to steal fuel and humanitarian assistance from UN facilities. While Israel is doing everything to get Palestinians, civilians, out of harm's way, Hamas is doing everything to keep Palestinian civilians in harm's way.
Yeah, and Tony, he goes on to say, I want to make it clear that Israel's position on a ceasefire is just like the United States wouldn't declare a ceasefire after 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. We're not agreeing to a ceasefire with Hamas after the attacks on October 7th. That's the way he sees it.
Well, the only reason it's an issue is because the United States has been pushing it quietly behind the scenes. And this is the issue. I mean, our media has been pushing, as we mentioned in the beginning of the interview, Chris, but what's really dangerous, and by the way, I've read credible articles on Hamas saying, oh, gee, we didn't expect this reaction. We didn't think that the United States would be quite so strongly in support of Israel's effort to come after us. And I think that's true. I think that the United States is pulling its punches. It's trying to appear to be supportive to the Israelis, but behind the scenes dragging their feet. And I think we need to look internally on how our side is not playing up and up. This is very dangerous. And I've seen this before. We've seen it before. I don't think it's been more obvious here, where you've got SecDef Lloyd Austin basically lecturing them about things which are, he has no business lecturing them on. He should be out there cheering them on and helping them do it instead of trying to caution them. You got Tony Blinken trying to go behind the scenes to counter the iron will of Netanyahu and the people to do something to end this. It's very dangerous because, Chris, as I mentioned, and I think you would agree, I believe your audience would too, Hamas has stated as a policy goal to eradicate and eliminate Jews just like the Nazis. And when they're done with the Nazis, when they're done with the Israelis, they plan to do what the Nazis had planned to do globally, is eliminate anybody who disagrees with their version of Islam. That means they would eliminate 95% of the Islamic faith. So they are not an organization that is out to free people or promote their interests. They're out to create death and destruction for everybody who doesn't agree with their very limited, very severe interpretation of Islam. That's it.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Tony, isn't it interesting that the left can see fit to declare Putin that kind of guy, but they don't see Islamists as those kinds of people?
Well, because look, Putin is a bad guy. He's a thug, but he's not a
supremacist.
Civilization.
Yeah,
no, he's not. Yeah. So it's interesting that the progressive left essentially has become apologists for anything that's totalitarian and wants to undermine the very foundation of civilization. And then if they don't like someone, they're going to paint them as someone who's trying to do what they're trying to do.
Yes.
It's a grand irony.
Tony Shaffer, a great resource. We just value you so much, and thank you for that. By the way, I'm going to show my kids Lawrence of Arabia now. That gave me a great idea. I had not thought of that until now. I also have a 17-year-old. So how did he take to it, by the way?
Well, we're halfway through it.
You're slogging through it. Yeah, okay.
I'm looking at him right now, and he's like, we'll get to the rest of it very soon. So we will finish Lawrence of Arabia. I'm trying to explain to him the deeper meaning of what's going on right now so he understands for himself.
Can I tell you something?
Think for yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just so pleased to hear this from you because you, who are one of the smartest people I know, have a 17-year-old and you're slogging through. I have an 18 and a 17-year-old son, and it terrifies me to sit down and try to talk with them about this stuff. If you're struggling with it, I feel so much better about myself. So thank you for that this morning, Tony, if nothing else. Thank you.
Yeah, teenagers are teenagers, no matter what there is. So just saying.
Thank you, my friend.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.